And then what I thought we could do as we start things, I'm going to get, so we've got some information on, interview tips and tricks for like job interviewing and some ideas around that. And then we also have, depending on the timing, like this might be the only topic that we're going to talk about today, but if there's room for discussion around disclosing a disability with an employer or during an interview or after a person's been hired, then we can touch on that. And then what I thought might be a real comfortable scenario is that we'll start discussing this, and then I can pause the info at 10-15 minutes in, and people can ask questions or have comments, or if people are comfortable just putting up your hand, if you know what that option is on your computer screen, and if you don't, just like this, put up your hand, and if you've got a comment or a question, we can just address it at that time. And this is a informal, relaxed session. So
that's what they always say at interviews.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, I'd like to, just before we get started, Mike, I'd like to just acknowledge that we are working today and doing this session on traditional lands of local Indigenous people. I'd just like to acknowledge that. And just a bit of an introduction. Mike Broderick is the vocational counselor and specialist down at the, he's the IPS guy, so that's the individual placement specialist down at Tri-Cities Mental Health, and he and his position are embedded into the mental health team, and he works in conjunction with other members of that team to help people with their vocational goals. Myself, I'm Donna Bonertz, and I'm the Employment and Rehabilitation Coordinator here at the New View Society. And today we are going to talk about job interview tips and tricks and sort of ideas around the interview, ways to make it friendlier, less stressful, and some good ideas for that situation. Mike, did you have anything to add introductory wise before we just jump in?
Not really. I think that, other than to say that I'm going to concentrate on something called a behavioral interview, or behavioral interview questions, which is something that it's become quite popular now, because it gives the employer an idea of how you would react in certain situations. And it gives a situation. And generally speaking, the way you answer that question, or any question that's an interview question, or that's a behavioral interview question, is to say, here's what the problem was, here's what I did about it, and here's what happened afterwards. That type of thing. So 1, 2, 3 type of answer. Generally speaking, if you're doing that, you're having a great interview. And then I think at the end of the interview, there's something very important that you have to remember, that if you feel you are having a good interview, and they do happen, and sometimes you're right, a good thing to do is to make sure you walk away from there with the interviewer's card, their name, with their name on it, and email address, and I'll tell you why later.
All right. Well, let's keep rolling. Carry on. Let's just go.
Okay. Well, the first question is probably the toughest. It's something that every time somebody hears it, it strikes fear into their hearts. As a matter of fact, they usually say, "Oh, I hate it when they ask that question," but it's always going to be the first question. And it's always going to be the hardest to answer because it concerns you. And it goes as follows. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You see how tough that's going to be? There's certain things you don't want to talk about yourself. Does anybody want to try that right now?
Oh,
There's
that's,
so
Greg, tell
much
me a
to
little.
know. There's so much to know about a person that you can't really put it in a 2-minute kind of answer.
Yeah. No, you have to put it in about a 30-second type of answer.
Okay, that's even tougher.
Judy,
So
you
maybe-
got some thoughts on that?
Well, I would probably start with some of the things I've done as work and
Yeah.
maybe in particular to what I would like to do as a job.
Okay. A good place to start to roll off that is to start by saying your name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just take it from there. And you're right. Talk about work. Talk about talk a little bit about education. And you're even allowed to put a little bit about something that you like to do. Like if you're an aerobics instructor, save that till the end. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It keeps it nice and brief. It keeps everybody on edge. And if the person wants to ask an extra question, they can. But the groundwork's already been laid, so you know what's going to happen, and you can almost predict the end of the thing. So your name, what you your schooling, and your work experience. 1, 2, 3. That's all you need to do. Donna.
hey, Mike, I was thinking, you know how there's a certain level of stress, associated with a job interview. It can be a nerve-wracking experience. Do you think that when a person is asked that question, tell me a bit about yourself, are people more prone to talking about themselves, about, personally, this is, who I am, this is some of the things about me, or do people automatically know, or should they know that it's, because the interview is about work, it should be work focused?
That's what I'm saying. If
Yeah.
you want to talk politics, not a good place to talk politics. If you want to talk sexual orientation, probably not a good place to talk about that either.
Or religion.
Or religion, those types of things you want to leave on the back burner. You want to talk work, education, the stuff that you did that got you to work, and a little bit of something extra, a little bit of a hobby. I collect stamps. Actually, if you did something, if you were something that if you said you're into fitness, so much the better, because a lot of employers take a look at their list of candidates with one eye on the list and the other eye on a little sheet that they have that could be time lost due to injury or illness. And generally speaking, if somebody is busy doing something, they're not busy getting sick. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sure does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, taking care of yourself is a responsibility that some people find very challenging. And and you're right, they don't think that it might matter, but it really does. Like if there's a perception about you that you are a person who takes your health and your well-being seriously, then, ideas that you'll take other things, seriously, and consider, be considerate about that. So yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. My second question has to do with your relationship with others, like let's say with customers. Let's say you're working in retail and you had some customers, or you're working as a landscape artist or something like that, and you had some customers, or if you're working on drywalling or something like that, and you had some customers. And tell me about a time when a client was dissatisfied with the service they were receiving. What did you do, and what was the result? You want to tackle that?
Sure. I was at
Sure.
McDonald's and the order was late for the customer and they had to sit out in the lot and wait and wait and wait. And they complained and I went out and I gave them a free meal card and said it wouldn't happen again. And they came back as a customer expecting it wouldn't happen again. And and it went well, and they turned out to be a repeat customer.
That's good. That's exactly the type of answer you want. You want to have you doing something, and you want to have a result. You
I'd
got a
like to
result,
have
you
it
gotta,
reflect an actual situation, not like a projected idea that, oh, well, I would do this or I would do that. It's nicer to have a concrete example.
yeah.
Yeah.
Judy, you want to give that one a try?
Well, I think I've always been really good at customer service, so I always treat people like they're priority and important. I can't think of an incident rate off the bat.
Okay, that's a good incident that you thought of because you gave an excuse for why it never happened. And I think I believe it. Some interviews might not believe it though, and they might want to pressure you for something. You must have had something bad happen.
Oh, I'm
You just,
sure.
yeah, but you know, you don't have to talk about it. You know, just say, you know, I haven't had that happen directly, but I know myself well enough to know that here's what I would do in if a situation came up. And then you talk about giving away the McDonald's coupons.
Yeah, or that you observed, another colleague or coworker go through
Yeah,
a rough patch with a customer, and this was how they handled it. And this is what you learned from that, or, something like that.
yeah. And speaking of coworkers, that brings us up to question about it. Number 3. Tell me about a time when you weren't getting along with a coworker. What did you do? What did you do? What did you do? And what was the result? And you could say, yeah, I get along with everybody. I never, I never ever have any conflict with coworkers because I'm so nice and accommodating and I'm such a wimp. but a question. They might not believe it if you don't have any conflicts. You can think back to high school if you want, and you're doing a science project or something like that, and you said, no, the DNA goes into this valve here, or something like that, something equally bizarre.
It can be that's a tricky question too, because, on one hand, then you wonder, does the employer want to hear that, I went and reported that colleague to the supervisor, sort of in the snitch category, or does the interviewer want to hear that, I tried to resolve or tried to mitigate or tried to work with that colleague about, rectifying something like, behavior or whatever, or what is the interviewer looking for, that's a tricky question.
Probably both.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for both is, one, you can stand on your feet. They like to see that. They like to see independence. If they also like to see when a candidate knows their place, I guess, in the scheme of thing, and knows their place in terms of pay grade, and they know that probably a supervisor might do a better job because it would be their responsibility to to sort of step in and mitigate. And I think if a person was really witnessing, let's say, bullying or something like that, and they wanted it to stop, they can be assertive themselves, and like, every time you do that to me, I feel like hacking. I can't sleep at night and stuff, and I want it to stop. You can say something like that, and that works, and that would work for an employer because the employer can see that that's a strong person coming down. Or they also see a strong person going to the supervisor and saying, look, this is your pay grade, not mine. Here's what happened, and I want it to stop.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I wonder too if it, if it also speaks to, like, an employer can put a lot of time, effort, and money into training people and having them, work well on the team. And so a person can have you know, an employee can have all of the skill, all of the knowledge about the task at hand, but if they can't work effectively in relationships with other team members, that can be like the most damaging of all. So the employer really needs to know, if I invest this time, money, and energy into you, because you can learn aspects of the job. Anybody can learn how to do this, that, or the other. But if you can't get along with people, that's harder to teach. Like that isn't like a given.
Yep. Any questions on that one? It's an odd question because there's, you know, like either answer is correct as long as you answered it.
I was
McDonald-
thinking, sorry,
No,
I-
go ahead,
I-
Judy.
I was just thinking, like, if you have a conflict with a coworker, is it okay just to say, let's agree to disagree? And if there still is an issue after that, maybe we need to have somebody higher up to help us out.
That's a good plan. That is a good plan, because you're doing something.
Mhm.
You're speaking up. And as a
Yeah, I think
behavioral
so.
interview, that's what we're asking for. We're asking,
Proactive, yeah.
we're asking you, to be proactive. My computer doesn't like that word sometimes. Every now when I write proactive on it, underlines it in blue, but
It is
But,
one word though, right? Like
yeah.
proactive is one word, yeah.
It's also a product on TV. It's a face cleaner. It's a
Oh.
soap.
Oh, really?
Proactive. It's a whole line of body products.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, is that okay to leave that one there to say that it's wide open as long as you say something?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good, you know, tail end of that. I like sort of what the Mike, you shared your notes with me before the session today, and I like the sentence in there, you know, don't get trapped, like have something, an idea in mind of how you would answer those questions. Because if you're prepared, you know, and you have some experience going over that in your mind, it flows much easier than, you know, being caught flat-footed and not knowing what to say at all.
Yeah.
Practice, it's practice.
Kind of neat at McDonald's. When we first started out, we were taught the 3 C's: communication, cooperation, coordination. So they trained us to work and talk at the same time and not think so much and just go with the flow, work and talk, communicate, make sure everybody understands what's going on, give orders, take orders. And it became automatic. It was a fun job.
Yeah. Do they still say that about McDonald's, that if you work there, it's one of the best training grounds there is for you know, employment of any kind?
I haven't heard about it in a long time. I was speaking with a young woman today, and we were talking about work. She's getting into the work field. She's out of school, and we talked about getting experience in McDonald's would be a good place to get experience. And she said it looked pretty depressing. They were overworked, they were understaffed, and she didn't want to go for the job.
Yikes.
So I think they're looking in other directions on where to work and get experience.
But you know, there's 2 ways to look at that. They're overworked and understaffed and stuff like that. But there's something you can watch there, and that's what the supervisor does. And how does the supervisor cope with the fact that they got a rebellious crowd on their hand? And that is where people get jobs in management, learning how to cope with stuff like that. And I had this, you know, the person that owns McDonald's in Port Moody and Coquitlam along the Barnett Highway, and also the one up here on Ottawa Street, and I think one more somewhere. They have $1 million house in Burnaby. I saw their $1 million house. So they made $1 million on basically saying you want fries with that. So
I really like the sort of that extra layer that you described about how, that in some ways being overworked, stressed out, that sort of thing is a training ground for, an overseer position or a management position. That's a nice way of looking at that, right?
Because there's ways that managers tend to work under pressure, and they kind of keep people happy sometimes.
Mm.
Sometimes you can find that happy medium, and managing people who are kind of unmanageable, or people on their first day on the job sometimes, and how do you make them feel at home, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So that brings us up to number 4. What are your greatest strengths, and what's your greatest weakness? The strengths are good. You can talk about those till the cows come home, because you know what they are. Your weaknesses, if you mention a weakness, it's good to have a way to give yourself a way out of it. So if my weakness is computers, let's say. By the way, my weakness is computers. And I have to. Well, that's one of my other weaknesses is management of paper. It just doesn't happen for me. It heaps up on my desk, and there it stays. But because I used to be an archaeologist, everything's in stratigraphic layers. So so if I remember when I did something, I know where it is. That's my greatest strength. It's my greatest weakness. My greatest weakness is solution. Is that I used to be an archaeologist, which was once my greatest strength. So computers are a good way to look at something that is a weakness, because you can always do something about it. You might be able to take a course or something like that.
So like always have like the idea that it's solution focused, that there's could be a weakness, but it's fixable.
Yeah.
Rather than, there's probably some things it's a good idea not to mention, like I'm never on time for anything, or, that sort of thing. You might not want to go there, but like an example. Do you have an example, Mike, of what, I was just trying to think of one, maybe saying, well, one of my greatest weaknesses is that, when things get busy, I really have to remind myself to focus on, priorities, because, sometimes I really want to get it all done. But my solution to that is that I, in the last couple of years, I've been trying to get better at prioritizing things or organizing things. So I don't know if that really speaks to the question or not.
I like this one. But a long time ago, I applied for a job at the school board. It was an employment program, and by golly, I got the job. But before I got the job, he said, "What are you?" This fellow asked me, what's your biggest weakness?" And I said, "Well, it's got to be computers." And it's too bad, because I noticed that everything here is all computer oriented. The classroom is full of computers and stuff like that. But what I did before the job started, they hired me for some strange reason, even though I gave them that goofy answer in the interview. I had a key to the place, and I had an alarm code punch in, so I punched in on a Sunday afternoon at about 4:00, and I stayed till about 4:00 in the morning, going through the help menu of Word to try to figure out how to work it, and that caused a great big riot to happen the next day. as I went through this thing, and I was able to teach them all of Word in basically one session and a half, but half a session extended into lunchtime. And my boss came up and he says, you know, Mike, you lied at your interview. You said you weren't any good at computers, yet you had these guys all eating out of your hand for the whole hour and a half. So then I told him what I did. You what? You broke into the place? So yeah, it's having a weakness and then being able to do something about it. And that's what a behavioral interview is. It's doing something about it. Does anybody else have any takes on that?
Sure. One of my weaknesses is I have to write things down, but that can turn into a strength because I make less mistakes.
Yeah.
Because
As long
I've got
as-
it written down and it's recorded and I know what I need to refer to.
Okay, that's a good plan, as long as you read it.
Yeah, for sure. I always keep a little notebook with me.
Yeah.
That's nicely played, Greg. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Judy? You got any experiences you can draw on from the past or things you might want to say?
I agree with Greg. I have to write things down too, like pointers and just notes on how, you know, how I learned things and how to remember them. That's a real tool for me.
No, that's a really good plan. For me, that's all it is a plan, because I write stuff down and then I lose it. I lose what I've written it on. And doesn't really make that much difference. However, it's a good plan. It's a good plan if it works.
I kind of learned from my dad as well. He would come home and he'd put the keys wherever, and then he'd search everywhere for the keys when he had to leave. And I found out that if I put the keys in the same spot every time that I come into the house, I always know where my keys are. So
Yeah.
Same with the book as well.
Yeah.
Good plan.
Yep. Good plan. For sure. Yeah, no, the greatest strength and greatest weakness question, that's a standard question that will come up more often than not. Actually, all of the things that you've raised so far are, you know, pretty, they're really included in most interviews that you'll experience for sure.
We
But
sort of
having the practice and knowing what you might say is really half the battle for sure.
we kind of concentrated on the weaknesses. What about your strengths?
Yeah, the strengths would be, you know, depending on your personality, I guess some people have no problem at all talking about their strengths, that it could border on arrogance, and you don't want to go in that direction. I mean, that could work for you or against you, I guess.
Yeah.
Depending. But
So what you're saying is be kind of humble,
yeah,
and maybe rely on the fact that you got to where you are right now based on your strengths. So you probably have them. So you can make a little laundry list of what they are, and that laundry list I would put it on my resume, calling it key strengths, where I make a little list of saying, well, I'm bilingual,
I'm
punctual, I'm
physically fit.
physically fit. Yeah, so stuff like that. And you can rely on those to bring you to an answer to that question without being overbearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't want to be overbearing on your resume either.
No. And you don't want to, overdo it on the, I don't want to say falsehoods, but there's a lot of people that apply for jobs that, aren't absolutely truthful on their resume, but, certainly blatant lies won't get you anywhere, but most people sort of beef up this or that in a resume. that, aren't necessarily absolutely true, but mostly true,
Another thing to sort of, ponder as you're getting ready to answer that question, which will probably come up. Take a look at the job description that you're applying, the one that you're applying for, and maybe take 2 or 3 strengths out of that would be able to do it. So let's say you've got, good analytical skills and stuff, if they want you to do some writing or some research and that type of thing. I can't think of any other good skills that you could throw in there, but whatever they are, there'd be something that would match up with the your job description.
I was just trying to put myself in the position of applying for a job myself. So one of the, and there's the demographic thing is included here. So I'm, a person of a certain age. I'm almost 60 years old. I mean, if I was looking for other work or a different job, one of the things I think the employer would be wondering about is, well, how are you with technology? What are your computer skills like? Sort of those types of things. But then as an attachment to that, like right now I'm transitioning from using paper, and we were talking about that earlier, Mike, using paper to, write everything down and to putting, everything on my phone and in my calendar. And there's still parts of me that think, should I trust my phone or my electronic calendar to keep track of everything? And then my concern is, well, what if I lose my phone? Well, same thing would happen as if I lost my day timer, sort of thing. So, but having from the employer's perspective, then, they might have a more confidence in you as a prospective employee if you are a person of a certain age, but you're more than willing to grasp on and participate in the digital world, as opposed to holding on to that paper and daring people to pry it from my cold dead hand, sort of thing. Yeah, so there's that. And that's certainly an age-related question too. More so, and typically people who are younger, that's what they've grown up with, is the digital world. So it's not an issue.
But my problem is kind of the opposite, because I turned 60 a long time ago, and as a matter of fact, I got to turn 70.
Dimension.
Yeah, I got to turn 72 in a couple of weeks.
Oh.
So that's if I was applying for another job, and I often do, just for little things, people are surprised that I remember how to write. And I'd look at them, and I kind of look at them, and I raise an eyebrow. I says, "Do you mean cursive writing? Does anybody know what cursive writing is?"
Oh, yeah.
That's where you write without lifting the nib off and make everything all flowery, and everybody used to write that way. Even doctors, because everybody was trained on doing that, using this muscle on your arm here to do all the guiding of a pen. Anyways, I really got off topic there, so sorry about that. But those are different types of strengths that you can come up with that change over time. Which brings us to the 5th question: why do you want to work here?
Yeah, that's a common question in an interview. Yeah.
I gave a really wimpy answer to that. I said that you want to work here because of all the research that you did on the company. An employer loves to hear that you did some research on the company, because it's kind of like talking about them. And what's his name? The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. Orson Welles. Not Orson Welles. Oh, what's his name?
George Orwell?
No, I can't remember. It'll come back to me. Oscar Wilde. It came back to me. And anyways, an employer likes to hear good things about themselves. When I came here, I asked, why are people wanting to work at Fraser Health for so long and stuff like that. And somebody came up with an answer. It was about leadership.
Hmm.
One of my interviewers came up with an answer about leadership, and they started talking about leadership. And they spent most of the rest of my interview time talking about leadership. I don't know how I got the job. I never said anything. But that's the type of thing, you know. Do some research before you apply for a job. When they ask you, why do you want to work here, you've got the answer right there in the research.
Is it also, helpful too to have, to have some, I call it like, daytime honesty about, there's, lots of reasons why people want to work at different places, but sometimes it, the large chunk of that is that, well, this has a pension, this job, this is, a job that I could be successful at long term, where I would have that security, where
Yep.
that it's not like a job that people move in and out of very often. It's it's a coveted workplace, and I witnessed that in other employees, and I see their satisfaction and their joy, but also is it okay to be honest, to say it'll provide me security, and I'm interested in that.
Why should I hire you?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? So
Not really. It's got a fairly easy answer to it. If you do resumes the way I do resumes, if you put down a laundry list, I call it, of stuff on your resume that would be your key strengths, just feed the key strengths back to them. I'm flexible, I'm dependable, and I have an excellent workplace attitude. I've got supervisory experience with a hands-on leadership style, emphasizing training and coaching. And just keep going on like that.
So stick with what you've already got on your resume, and as
Yep.
you feed it,
Yep.
kind of just keep feeding it, and then you're not reinventing something, right?
That's right. And you're not making stuff up on the spot. You don't want to appear to be doing that and say, oh yeah, there's one other thing that I wanted to do. I can't remember what it is now. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to get caught doing that, but you want to memorize your resume. And you want to make sure you put down that list of strengths that you have on there too. What's a good team worker? There's always somebody that wants to have their employees look like they're part of a team. And sometimes what they're thinking of is, well, you got a quarterback, you got a fullback, you got a halfback and a half track, and and they're thinking in terms of sports. But the question has really nothing to do with sports. It's got to do with people's relationships with each other. And I come up with an image. Does anybody ever heard of head smashed in buffalo jump?
Yeah, I grew up about 20 kilometers from there.
Yeah, head smashed in buffalo jump is a UNESCO site. It's an archaeological thing, and it's where people used to go to hunt buffalo, and they did it the easy way. They
running them over a cliff.
They ran them over a cliff, and they died there, and that's where they were butchered. And they only took as much as they needed, for a year. But the thing is, what happened was they had a whole pile of people that would participate in the thing. A couple of the guys would be out roaming around in the field wearing buffalo skins, so they looked for all the world like a buffalo. And all of a sudden, they would stand up and they started being, started pretending it was actually mad cow disease they were in the middle of. And the buffalo would start to run. And then there'd be other people that were hiding behind rocks that would go up and scare the buffalo and sort of focus them into one line of bison heading for a cliff. And sooner or later, they were at the point of no return, and that was basically the end of their hunt or the beginning of the harvest.
So teamwork.
That was part of a team that was doing it,
Yeah.
and that team, the horse wasn't around for very long in North America. It kind of came in with Columbus. There were horses here before that, but they all migrated to Asia in the other direction from the First Nations people that went, they came from Asia to here, or were created here, just depending on what the view is. Anyways, there was a bunch of megafauna that went over the other way, like camels and big fauna like horses, all went the other way, and they came back with Columbus. Anyways, when the Plains people got horses here, they really liked them because they could really hunt the buffalo easily. And in fact, what they did was they turned that team into basically a cavalry, where they could be able to, had hand signals and yelling signals and stuff like that that would, move a herd in different directions really fast. And that sort of turned into, bring us up all the way up to George Custer, who fought at the Little Bighorn. And he found out how trained a cavalry the First Nations people were as they slaughtered them. I didn't mean to put a damper on that, but that's another session of teamwork. So anyways, to sort of what I think a good team worker has are good communication skills, and that's listening, which may or may not be a communication skill. I think it is. Problem solving, which I think is also a communication skill, and negotiation. Those are the types of things that are happening. I guess I could have used a better example. How about a care aide? Does anybody know what a care aide is? Works in a long-term care facility.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get, your clients there are people who may have diabetes or something like that. Because of that, they may have some real weight problems, and there's and often they'll fall out of their wheelchair. So a care aide would be a person that would round up other care aides and almost immediately say, I'll take this part, you take that part, you take that part, you take that part, 1, 2, 3, up, and lift her off the ground and put her into either back into the chair or on a gurney so they can, sort of further examine. Or sometimes they'll be doing the same thing with a lift, just to get things done quickly. So the negotiation is, you take that part, you take that part, I'll take this part. The listening is listening to you take this part, you take that part, I'll take this part, and the problem solving is you got to get them up from there to there. Does that sound okay? Is that a good description?
Well, that's teamwork.
That's a team.
I bet you everybody on this call is also familiar with what it's like to work on a poor team. And have sort of that part of the reality, like the things like gossiping and bullying, and sometimes how people get cliquey in workplaces, and, certain people are excluded, and, others are sort of some of the critical skills to make as a good human being often aren't, coveted in the workplace to make a good worker, but the employer wants to be able to know or to suss out, would you be a good addition to the team, and how well you would work in that team environment. Because again, you can teach an employee a skill, but you can't teach how to get along with other people. Yeah. Judy, did you have any experiences in the past that you wanted to offer about the team environment? Has it always been a success for you?
I I think I've always had a good attitude to work together and include other people. I'm a good listener. It doesn't feel good if you're left out,
Yeah.
but I guess that's all I want to say.
Okay.
I'm good with communication.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Greg, do you have anything to offer on that idea?
I just had something that my mother told me. She said you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. And that's always stuck with me. She also said sugar attracts more flies than vinegar. So
Yeah,
just to be nice in the workplace and just be your regular happy person, focus on
Mhm.
yourself and try to spread good vibes around you.
yeah.
The
You
horse
want to be
thing is,
around the good vibe people. You don't want to spend time around negative or angry people for
yeah,
sure.
my doctor once told me spend as much time with healthy people as you can, just to keep your own health up. So I'm always striving for healthy people to share my time with.
Nice.
Like yesterday, I went on a hike and I was able to meet somebody at the bottom, and we walked all the way up the Coquitlam Crunch and back down. And it was a good hike, and we both enjoyed it. And then we went our separate ways.
Nice.
So sometimes relationships are sporadic or short term, some are long term.
Yeah.
And sometimes you really need a drink of water after something like that.
So we're about 7 minutes out from the end of our hour. Mike, did you want to let's go through the rest of your questions here?
Yeah, there's only two. What are some qualities of leadership?
Mm,
So I like saying, ability to assume responsibility. I didn't tell you about my old man, the tugboat captain, yet, have I?
your old what? Sorry.
My old man, who was a tugboat captain.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
don't. I don't think we heard that
One of the trickiest things about driving a tugboat is parking the damn thing.
one.
Mainly because they're big. Like his tugboat wasn't one of the little tiny ones that you see, molesting all the freighters as they come into the harbor. He had things that towed log barges and stuff like that to Japan and back. Mind you, they were empty when they came back, but it was the type of thing, but when you park it, what he used to do was he used to give out a walkie-talkie to his mates in the wheelhouse, and he'd go down to the stern of the boat, and he'd start because this particular boat had two engines in it. He'd say what the revs were on the starboard engine, what the revs would be on the port engine, in order to back the thing in at an angle. So he'd go down there and he'd throw out these words per minute type thing and stuff like that. And when I was at his funeral, his two mates were there, and they said that they could never figure out how he did it, like how he managed to do that sort of thing. And I said, well, didn't he tell you? No. I mean, is this a trick to it? And I said, yeah. Do you want me to tell you what the trick is? The trick is you have no idea what the boat's going to do if you're the skipper, but you have an educated guess. So if you take that educated guess and you make adjustments to it along the way, you'll eventually get the thing in. If you get it in wrong, it'll cost probably about $150,000 or something like that in repairs to the ship and then repairs to the wharf. But if you do it right, you're a hero.
Mm.
So he wanted to be the hero all the time. He had responsibility. He could also delegate responsibility by giving out the walkie-talkie. He had the ability to make mistakes, but he managed to avoid it, and he also had the ability to correct them before they happened. That's my qualities of a good leader. And it's not hanging a sign up behind the toilet in the bathroom saying, the captain is always right. He may be misinformed, but he's always right. I had to look at that every time I peed. And the other question is, do you have any questions for us? My advice to you is to have a question. Tony Waiters was the coach of the Vancouver Whitecaps a long time ago. One of his coaching methods was to get the goaltender to face a penalty shot. And he said, either you go one way or the other way to stop the shot. Don't do nothing. I say the same thing. Don't say nothing. And I use the double negative on purpose by saying they want to hear you ask something. They don't want to hear you say nothing. So ask something. The question that I always like was, what would be the qualities of the best person for the position? And they answer that. They'll answer that. Sure as anything, they'll answer that. And as they answer that, you have a responsibility to listen to the answer, because you got them to listen to all your answers. You're going to listen to theirs. And at the end of it all, you're going to say, well, that sounds really good. As a matter of fact, that matches my resume, all the strengths of my resume. And I can go down point by point, what they said and what I've written. That's a good answer to that question.
Is that something that you can use to as the follow-up? Like, so after, post interview, it's a job that you really are interested in and you want to keep pursuing it. There's the follow-up phone call or email the day after to say, hey, I really appreciated your being candid about the type of candidate you were looking for. And just wanted to point out or to reiterate that, that's the kind of person that I am. And you could refer to the resume, I guess, at that point too.
Yeah.
I
Remember the
have
beginning.
one question.
Yeah.
A leader, there's always been the debate, a leader is born or created or learned. What makes a leader? But something that I listened to from a person I respect is you got to learn to follow first. So you got to follow, you got to see how, because most of the time you're starting at the bottom in the company and you don't know the social structure. So you start at the bottom, you learn as much as you can. And then when opportunity arises, you start leading.
You learn as a team too.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be a good team player. You're learning the leadership skills at the same time, and also you're assuming them at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. My dad always said, like, when he started a job, he said, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. That's really all you can do, Greg.
It's good advice. It's sage advice. Absolutely. You can work your way into being an excellent employee at an excellent workplace and make it better, by your contributions, for sure.
Yeah. Remember at the beginning of our talk, I asked you to, make sure you get the person's name and card and stuff like that. And the idea there is, I always tell my clients that if they have a good interview and they don't want the job, there's another double negative for you. Don't write a thank you note.
Mm.
In other words, if you want the job, write a thank you note. And and the reason for that, it doesn't have to be very much. It just have to be a reminder that you like the job, that you really want the job, and you enjoyed meeting them. And I thought your style of interviewing was really interesting because you made it appear more like a conversation than an inquisition. It makes the employer feel respected. Now, what you don't want to do is hand them the thank you note after the interview. What you want to do is you want to sit there, think about what was said at the interview, think about the questions, and make a things, thanking them for the interview. And I thought your questions were really on target. It looks like you're really trying to build a team here, and I'd like to be a member of that team.
Oh.
So really think about how you fit in.
I think as we move forward here at the, there'll be, there'll be in-person job interviews again, but I think there's going to be still a lot of virtual interviews too, because it's going to be more cost effective and convenient. So I think, all the things that we've talked about here today are just as important in a virtual interview for sure.
And
this
we're pretty
virtual
virtual right
is all
now.
new to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was just going to say this virtual, the computer and talking long distances is all new to me. I've always been like, I've never even done social media, Facebook, Tinder, whatever's out there. I
Yeah.
just avoid it.
Can't tell from here.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Oh,
Can't tell from here.
No.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
No,
you seem
you.
very comfortable on virtual. Sorry, go ahead, Judy.
I was just gonna say the same thing as you just said. You look very comfortable on virtual.
Thank you, Judy.
No
I feel
problem.
comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm in the sanctity of my own little space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always hard going into somebody else's space because there's a real authoritarianism in job hunting. Like I'm the employer, you're the employee, you got to do what I say. And it's always hard to get past that.
You feel the power differential, right? Like
Big time. Yeah. And
Yeah.
because they've got all this experience, they've got 20 years at the company and they've got all the education, the certificates. So the best thing that I really hope for is to job shadow and for somebody to take me under their wing and kind of guide me along the way. It's good to have a mentor in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, folks, it's we've come to our the end of our session here, and today we did not get a chance to move on to the disclosing information about health or illness in an interview, but I'm seeing that as like an additional session that maybe we could run in September. So that's a good thing to look forward to. And I wondered, Mike, if you were okay with, so the session that you went over here today, you've got this in a written document. If our participants here were interested, is it okay to pass them a paper copy?
No, sure, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay,
Right.
or I can email it
Yeah.
as well if
that's fine.
for reference. So I guess before we wrap up today, Judy or Greg, is there any comments or questions that you had before we call it quits today?
Well, one of them for me was about disabilities or learning disabilities, things like that. And I think you brought it up that it could be covered in September.
Yeah, I mean, it is a topic in and of itself. I sort of floated it as a possibility for today because the dynamics of a virtual or any sort of meeting is that you've got your topic, but you need to also have a backup topic in case we burn through the first one and we've got some time left. So, but yeah, it is in and of itself, a very robust topic that would take some time to discuss. So I'm certainly really happy to put together some stuff for that for September. And then of course, individually, like if there's an interview that comes up before then or whenever that might be, I'm happy to talk about it in person or one-on-one about it as well. And I'm sure Mike is as well. So,
Great.
That was great. Thank you.
all
I
right.
appreciate it. It's experience. Everything virtual is experience. And I appreciate everybody's view on the workplace and getting work and interviews. And it's a tough world out there sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Greg, and the way Donna set it up, you can go back to it.
Oh,
Use it as
this is recorded and it will be emailed to us?
No, it will be available on the New View website.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, not immediately. I have to wait for Justin to get back from vacay. He's the administrator for our website attachments. But yeah, this session is recorded and will be available on there for members
Okay.
to see and go over. So, and then in addition, I'll have the written document of the things that we went over today.
Super.
So, yeah, and so I really want to thank you for attending, everybody, and thank you so much, Mike, for all of your information and wisdom and experience that you've shared with us all today. Really,
I made it all up.
Yeah, I like these stories.
well, that's how, you know, you remember things, right? When it's embedded in a story, you know, because facts are one thing, but when it's more interesting, you're more likely to remember it, right?
Brains like stories.
Yeah. That's why the elders, that's all that oral history. That's how it was all passed down in different cultures all over the world. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Especially
folks.
head smashed in buffalo jump.
It's so funny. It literally, I grew up on a farm like 20 kilometers from there. And my sister still farms in that area, and she's got 2 or 3, smaller scale buffalo jumps on her property. And as long as we've been alive, we've, been aware of people digging, having different digs going on at different times. And so, yeah, really interesting place. Very hot in the summer for sure, but yeah.
Estipa skiki kiki cuts.
Sorry?
Estipa skiki kiki cuts.
I-
Head smashed in buffalo jump in Cree, I think. Not Cree.
there
Blood.
you go.
Yeah.
Were you able to hear that and say it right away, or did you practice over time?
It's I think I knew it right off the bat.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's neat. I've never been one to be able to do that.
Yeah.
All
It was
right.
so awesome I had trouble with.
Oh, yeah.
Sawassan. Yeah, many people pronounce it with the T, but
Yeah.
it's Sawassan is the
Mhm.
pronunciation. All right, folks, we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for attending. And I'm sure we'll be talking to each and every one of you very soon.
Thanks for
Thank you
hosting,
very
Donna.
much.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Donna.
you're
Thank you,
welcome.
Michael. Thank you, Judy.
You
Enjoy
take
the rest
care.
of the summer.
You too.
Yeah.
You too.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.